So instead of saying good morning, I can officially say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We are here for NYACCE's Lunch and Learn, and Quincy is going to be leading us today to talk about some self-care um, ideas and topics and how we can support each other and ourselves. So thank you so much, Quincy, for being here with us today and presenting for us. So I hand it to you, my friend.
My pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quincy Koffel, and I am so thrilled to be with you today. I am an educator and a licensed clinical social worker. So I come to you as a hybrid creature, bringing and holding all of the space of what it has been to be in education for 3 decades, and also very devoted to the idea that as educators, as the vessels and portals of knowledge and all that you hold, you are healers. And I'm passionate about devoting practices to healing healers. And especially as December is not a month, it is a verb. This feels particularly apt this time of year, as so many are giving so much. I would love to know who we are sharing this space with today, who is on the call. I can understand particularly 12:06 on December 11th, like December's a verb. So if you can't turn your camera on, we understand completely. But if perhaps you could introduce yourself in the chat, where you're coming from, and your name and role, just so we know who we're in commune and sharing space with. And then if you are able to come off mic, that is especially exciting. So I would love that as well. So if you're able to drop it in the chat, wonderful. And if not, then the coming off mic would be absolutely lovely.
I'm happy to come off mic.
Wonderful.
My name is Kathy Houghton. I am the executive director at Literacy New York, and the project that we have for state ed is the STAC, the Support and Technical Assistance Center. So we support a whole cohort of education providers in rest of state, and I'm located in Buffalo.
Thank you so much.
And I put my information in the chat box as well, but happy to unmute myself. My name is Maria Huntington. I am the Adult Services Administrator for CV Tech up in Plattsburgh, New York, and a very proud member of the NIACE board for almost a decade, I think. So yeah, very exciting.
I love that. I see we have Leslie Wright, Adult Ed in Rochester, New York, Action for a Better Community. Hi,
Yes.
Leslie. And we have Theo. And Theo's been a GED instructor and a case manager since 2018 and is in the greater southern tier, Elmira and Corning. And Catherine, you are most welcome. And whenever you are able, drop it in. I think we have one.
Hi, this is Catherine
Hi,
Deemer
Catherine.
Carlisle. I am coming to you from the Niagara County Jail. I'm with Orleans Niagara BOCES, and I'm a test administrator and transition coach, and I've been doing this since I think 2013. And so I'm also getting over upper respiratory infection, so I keep coughing. So I'm going to keep myself on mute and not have you watch that.
I love it. Thank you so much. And yes, hello.
Good afternoon. So I'm Barbara Egloff. I am the Divisional Administrator for Eastern Suffolk BOCES on Long Island and oversee our all of our adult programs, especially adult literacy, and including our jail. So I have something in common with Catherine.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm Quincy. I am an educational consultant and a clinical therapist. I carry a caseload of 35 per week across the life cycle from about age currently 11 to about 67, an intermodal therapist. And in terms of adult, of my work in educational consulting, um, I'm so excited to be in spaces such as this that are so div we're in such diverse parts of the state. That is incredible. I think we almost have a complete constellation. Like we have the borders of New York represented. I'm currently coming to you from Westchester. And in our work, there are so many portals that are created that are opportunities to give. I have been blessed for the last 30 years to witness New York State in action, from working in central New York, Syracuse, up in Rochester, Long Island, New York City, Yonkers. I truly can say I've worked Staten Island to Rikers Island to Long Island. So even who knew New York had so many islands? And I am very devoted to adult education, and both in GED settings and through literacy in ESL modalities, and also in carceral and alternatives to incarceration in diversionary settings. And so holding space for all of the energy and purpose that brought you onto this call today. And I look forward to offering an experience for you. And so I'm going to screen share. Oh, Maria, could I kindly ask you to enable that? Thank you so much. And as we're doing that, could I ask you, as the I think it's send a request. Here we go. Fabulous. Thank you,
There you go.
Maria.
You're now a co-host, which means you can share your screen.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to share. And if you could let me know, can you see the screen as it is now? Wonderful. Um, Barbara, could you read the title of today's workshop?
Certainly. It's Be the Light, Balancing the Fire and the Vessel.
What could this mean? I open this up to the group in the context of self-care. What could this mean? Be the light, balancing the fire and the vessel. I open it up to your also interpretations of what self-care means to you. What could this title mean? What could we potentially be evoking today? I see the chat coming up. A lantern. I love that, Theo. What comes up for you around a lantern? How does how could a lantern relate to self-care? And Kathy says maybe giving, receiving as well as giving. Absolutely. Portals that flow both ways. Thinking about a ship in the night, looking for a lighthouse. And please feel free to drop in chat and come off mic today. We will iterate in the way that is most comfortable for you to communicate. But as a facilitator, I love to chat. So please, jump off mic at any time if you'd like to share. And also, we very much honor if the chat is a comfortable modality. And then, Catherine, be the information to help others, but also use it for yourself. I really, really appreciate again, I love it. We've got such diverse geography and imagery that comes up around this. A ship in the night looking for a lighthouse. And so if we centered these words, be the light, balancing the fire and the vessel, I'd like to introduce the idea that we are the vessel, and that within us, what brings us to this work is fueled. And today we might evoke the metaphor that it is fueled by a fire. Now, fire is very interesting. What is the duality of fire? Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that? Kathy, when you think of fire, what do you think of?
So I was thinking the word duality. I think fire can be life-giving, but also destructive.
Yes.
And so there's kind of a balance there.
Kathy, that's, I think, so aligned, so right on the idea. Well, and my Pomsky agrees. So she's howling her approval in the background. Forgive the dogs barking. Lily. So the idea that fire is one of the most original and ancient forms of fueling, and of when it was discovered, we could cook disease out of meat, we could create and sustain lifespans expanded, and at the same time, fire can also incinerate. And that how oftentimes we wield it, we light a candle. So in preparation for today, I have my little Bath Body Works candles to the sides of the computer, but we're careful. We blow it out before we leave the room. So it brings us pleasure, maybe aromatherapy when we're around it, but at the same time, it's something to handle with delicacy. And so the passion and purpose that brings you to this work, we center today as the fire. And we enter into today's experience to explore strategies to make sure that we don't have to extinguish that which catalyzes us, that which creates passion in our hearts and in our spirits, but at the same time, does not also inadvertently take, but that it is giving to us. And so I'd love to invite into our opening experience. So I have some gentle learning objectives. I would ask maybe just to take a look. I won't read all of them aloud, but I am curious in the chat or off mic, what jumps out to you? Any phrases or words? I might share first, reclaim self-care. So I think it's something that we center for ourselves, but we don't as important and would tell a colleague that they really need to engage in, but may not always claim for self. What else jumps out to anyone? Boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah, I think about this a lot, and I think probably one of the things I recognized after I had children, right? Like I come of a very strong family that has strong work ethics, right? And so we were always constantly working, working, working. And then when I had kids, I was like, I can't keep up this pace. And then I had more children. So it's been something that I have definitely had to work on myself, my own boundaries, right? Of like, when work is work and home is home, and it doesn't happen all the time. There's going to be situations, especially if you're in an admin role where you're going to have to take calls, but being able to have acknowledge that and know that they're there and how you are going to handle them when they arise.
Thank you so much. I think it's so apt that this is what drew your attention because we have quite a few notations of rhythm, that was one of the words that stood out. And rhythm is so dynamic. And I think, Maria, thank you. What was also so key is I think sometimes we're surrounded by a culture that as a therapist drives me a little crazy. I call it serenity for sale. And it's the idea of like, if you buy this, even though I love candles, but if you buy this candle, if you buy this bath bomb, if you just go to this class, if you sign up for, if you, self-care becoming like another thing that you've added to your to-do list or that feels like something that must be done and also must be done in a certain way. Drop a one in the chat if you are someone who likes to sleep, and a two if you are someone who is a little bit doesn't sleep is not your favorite thing. Just have curiosity. One in the chat if like you're a good sleeper, and two if like sleep is not your favorite. Yeah. So we've got almost, say I'll contribute. So we're out actually an almost even divide. And just to center even that as an example for today around rhythms, the notion that what might look like self-care to myself might be different for Catherine, different for Theo, different for Kathy. My husband is a champion sleeper, like Olympics. And I used to be so annoyed by it because I would think, well, what are you doing? Like, what do we do? Wake up, come play with me. Come on, let's go. Until I learned that he was really like a gasoline tank. And when he slept, it was truly replenishing. On the other hand, I find much more respite in creation, in crafting and writing a curriculum, and my mind truly is at rest and ease. I'd love to hear in the chat from the group one practice that you engage in that feels restorative to you. So I'm going to put creation. Kathy says reading, brain dumping, getting it out. Laundry. Catherine, can you speak on that? Because this actually came up in a session I did yesterday, and it was so real.
Yeah, I think the thing with laundry, I've got two small kids like Maria. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and it's just never ending. But when I get to the point where I've like folded the last little socks and the last little shirts and everything is put away, it's just that moment of like, huh, I've accomplished this and
Yeah.
everything is good. And it's like a fresh start. It's like a little rebirth for my week. And so I think that's it. It seems very silly because it's a menial task, but I don't know why. And the same thing with dishes. Growing up, my parents made dishes very fun. My brother and I, to this day, don't mind doing dishes at big family gatherings because my parents were evil geniuses and it made us think that it was a great idea to do dishes as small children. And even now, we're just like, don't mind doing it. And it's one of those things that once it's done and everything is put away or in the drying rack, it's that like, moment.
Thank you. I love that. I think there's so much to be said around task task accomplishment, around the idea also of like we have this idea, again, often surrounded on social media that like meditative activities need to look like you're like planted on a lotus and like there's glowing light around you. And I don't know about you, but like there aren't too many lotuses like on a daily basis to go sit under the glow of. We have to generate from within what a meditative practice is. And in task completion, or sometimes even there's mindfulness in repetition, in an activity that takes our brain, but takes it away perhaps from the worries of the day. And I don't, I heard the laundry and the completion and the gratification. I think vacuuming is so gratifying because it just scoops it up and then all of a sudden it's clean. And I open that up. I see writing for fun, Theo. And if you would, I'd love to hear is if writing is a part of your daily practice in your job, there's something very interesting about things that we do, but then when we do them for selves, and Leslie says, reading. And so, as we continue to name these practices and perhaps engage in looking at a few more, I'd really love to open and offer the idea that self-restoration and mindfulness activities and self-care is so intimate and so individualized. And it's based on the way our minds need to regulate. And that's dynamic at different points in our lifespan. And so this is definitely not the self-care workshop. This is going to tell you that this is the way to take care of yourself, but instead the one that is going to hopefully offer portals of self-exploration to determine what is available to you and what you might like to explore a little bit further. So to continue on, we are going to, and just very quickly, we opened today also through three different praxi. So a trauma-informed lens, so being sure that we are emphasizing um, emotional safety, nervous system literacy, and I think Theo may have mentioned that earlier, like tuning into what our nervous system needs, practical application. So there are some on this call today that are like, all right, cool. Now tell me what it is, so I can go do it. Let's get to it. Like, let's not talk. I want the practices and what I call a soul aligned lens. So just the human, honoring the inner life of the participants. So the storytelling aspect, restorative rituals, how your personal story is so aligned with finding those portals, those opportunities for authentic self-care, and not necessarily a sense of like that serenity for sale that I've mentioned, where it's like we must go acquire something. In fact, mindfulness practices are so oft used because there's a real sense of equity to them that you actually, in theory, don't need any tools, any like it is. I enjoy this candle, but I don't need it in order to practice a number of different mindfulness-based practices if I was choosing those for self-care, that they can be done anywhere, attunement, self-attunement, and that's so important. And we have people tuning in from the Niagara County jail today, or I mean, you have a device that you've been able to tune in on, but having worked in carceral settings, Oftentimes we don't have access to our belongings for hours upon hours in the day. And so just really holding space that we're looking for modalities that have availability. And we have Paula joining us. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. Paula, if you could just drop in the chat where you're coming from, and what your role is. We're delighted to have you join us, and you're right on time. Right on time. And so I'd love to just engage us in an offering, an opening ritual. And in this, this is a mindfulness practice, and we call it a guided visualization. And I would like to offer that you are welcome to close your eyes, but you do not by any means have to, that we consistently use a trauma-informed lens, and we do that with our students as well. That sometimes that's a comforting state, and that sometimes just a soft gaze. So perhaps looking at I'm very excited that I have an animated GIF. I am Gen X, and to even have GIFs that are embedded in my slides has been a multi-year process. And this one is animated. Very excited about that. So perhaps your eyes are upon the tree that's growing or something in the space around you, soft gaze. Feet flat on the floor is the invitation. Everything today is an invitation. There's no requirements. Hands resting on thighs or heart or belly, wherever it feels good to you. And if it feels comfortable, let your eyes close or soften. Begin to notice your breath without changing it. Notice and feel your feet pressing gently into the floor. Now imagine roots unfurling from the soles of your feet, traveling deep into the earth. These roots are strong. They hold you. They steady you. With each exhale, it's an invitation to release something that you've been carrying that isn't yours to hold. And with each inhale, an invitation to draw up nourishment is that peace, steadiness, presence. And now, if it feels comfortable, gently place your hand over your heart and take a deep breath and ask yourself quietly, what is one thing I am ready to release? And what is one truth that I will root into moving forward? As a closing intention for our meditation, may you be grounded, not burdened, compassionate, not consumed. When it feels comfortable, I invite you to come back into our space. And if you could drop just one word in the chat about your somatic experience, about how you feel just in your body right now. Centered, unburdened, relaxed, still, calm. Coming from that place and using a little bit of that warmth, the fire as warmth right now. These two questions. One thing you are ready to release and one truth to root into. So I asked the question to the group, what is one thing that you are ready to release? What is one truth, something known that you would like to root into moving forward? I'm going to go to the next slide, and we won't be doing this in breakout rooms per se, and we are together in partnership. So this won't be a bilateral partnership. I'm iterating on this a little bit, but we are going to engage in something called mutual witnessing. And as a therapeutic modality, mutual witnessing isn't about fixing or offering advice, simply being seen, heard, known, that practice in itself is restorative. And if you are comfortable and come to this at your level of comfort, I invite you to drop in the chat one thing that you are releasing, maybe a word, an emotion, a pattern, and one thing you are rooting into, perhaps a truth, a value, a commitment to self. So just an example, I'm releasing the belief that I have to have all the answers. I'm rooting into the truth that presence is enough. Or I am releasing guilt that I am not meeting enough of my criteria, or I am rooting into loyalty, into vision. These are just examples. So I would love to hear you come off mic if you're comfortable, or drop in the chat to the level that you're comfortable. There's something quite interesting and dynamic about the fact that we're not known to each other, and that these are spaces where, and there's a whole other conversation to be had about something called third spaces, which are subclinical spaces where healing and connecting take place. A very famous third space. Anyone seen the sitcom Cheers? So where everybody knows your name. And Cheers was a sitcom and written with a lot of humor. But if you think about the things they talked about, bereavement, unemployment, divorce, really serious topics. But yet when you were coming, hi, Norm, come on over, that you were always welcomed. Barbershops, coffee shops, classrooms. We invite the notion that these are third spaces. There were the blue zones that were oft talked about in the Mediterranean. And for a long time, they're like, it's the fish, it's the olive oil, it's the tomatoes. This is why people are living to be 100 generation after generation. And that's actually been scientifically debunked. It was, and there's a great documentary on Netflix, but there that tells more of this if you're interested, but it was the place in the community. It was your role. It was being known and seen and valued, and that we can, even in this hour that we spend together, I posit that we're creating our own third space, particularly in the work that we do. Sometimes our students are transitional. We have them but for so long. So would anyone be comfortable? And I'm just going to check the chat to share one thing they are rooting into or one thing they are releasing, coming back to the chat. Kathy, do you want to speak it aloud or do you prefer the chat?
No, that's fine. I can say it. I am releasing worry and I am rooting into trust.
I'm so appreciative, Kathy. I'd love to hold the invitation just for a moment for anyone else, either off mic or in the chat. And maybe you're more comfortable with one than the other. And the invitation remains open. So if over the course of the workshop it comes up, please drop it in. Paula says, I'm releasing the expectation to get it right all the time. I'm rooting into the truth. I cannot control everything. Catherine, I'm releasing irritation. Leslie, I'm releasing overthinking things. Thank you for these shares and for these contributions, and just to reflect upon for yourself, what does it feel like to speak this aloud or to drop it in the chat? What do you notice in your body when you share and are heard? In our work, a lot of our students have significant trauma history.
Oh, Quincy, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if anybody else is having issues or it could just be me, which is entirely possible.
Oh no, Kathy
Oh,
and
there we
Paula,
go. There we go.
okay. Could I get a thumbs up from Maria, Paula, and Kathy if you can hear me? Okay, great. Perfect. And anyone, please jump in if something happens. We're in cross state, cross state space. That's so incredible that we're all able to come together in this way to share this space for this time. And so we come together with certain things in common. And in this part of the workshop, we are going to name some of what comes up and what we carry. So it's the science, but it's also the story. And just as an overview, this is a whole workshop unto itself, but the statistic that over 70% of the population has experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. It is very plausible from what I hear from the roles that you hold, or I am imagining have held at different points in your career, that you have experienced what we call vicarious trauma. So primary trauma is the storm that happens, the direct traumatic experience that happens to the individual. Vicarious trauma is a cumulative long-term exposure to the trauma of others. And it can often entail, if not cared for, if the soul is not cared for, if the body is not cared for, shifts in worldview or something we call cognitive schema. That's just our lens, like our paradigm, the way we look at the world. And when empathy, so drop one in the chat if empathy is important to your work. Drop one in the chat if empathy is important to your work. And so when empathy is important to your work, the ways that we are open and asked to be open to the humanity of others is just very different than a lot of professions. And we want to hold significant space for that, whether you are on the administrative side of it, or whether you're going back into a classroom or into a group setting and in a carceral setting today. So this is where we are cautious about the stories changing us and ensuring that if we see that there's a questioning of purpose or feelings of loss of hope or what we call emotional blunting, you start to just feel kind of numb to it, that these are signs that there's the potential for compassion fatigue. And this is not burnout. Burnout is a psychological syndrome. But compassion fatigue is where we catch ourselves before we reach burnout. This is a state where we start to feel a decreased capacity to empathize, emotional and physical exhaustion from prolonged exposure. You still care when you're in compassion fatigue, but it hurts to feel it. And so, how do we navigate these very real clinical truths that surround us that hold potential in the work we do, while maintaining that side of the fire that warms, while not reducing our presence and our purpose, but instead also recognizing that the caretaking is critical. So caring for the caregiver is critical. And so in that, I want to introduce the idea of trauma stewardship. And so the idea that if you are experiencing prolonged exposure, or if it's not always trauma, but it's high needs. So again, give me a 3 in the chat if you can think of 3 different types of needs from your either staff, because I want to recognize we have administrators on the call, from your students, from your, I don't believe we have any clinicians on the call, but if we did, from your clients. Drop 3 in the chat if you can think of 3 different types of needs that you've been hit with today. Kathy, that was a knowing smile. I can see you up in my screen. Kathy's smile just like was a whole workshop. That was a whole workshop. I see Paula with the knowing smile as well. Talk to me about this knowing smile. Does someone come off mic, please? There was too much there. That hit.
No, I was just thinking because thinking about a staff who just suffered a loss of a pet, which for me, I don't have pets. It's not something, but she's so broken about it. And it's been hard for me, but I've been really trying to be with her in that and understand, how it's hitting her so hard. So, and we get hit with these things. I had a board meeting this morning, and then I had a site visit where I had to go to a program and check on how they're doing. And so there's all these different areas that you have to kind of juggle.
And Kathy, I want to also just like really name that like you are asked to share or to empathize, truly empathize, right? Like, because this is not sympathy where it's like, oh, I really, really can understand like what that feels like, but you're trying to center that person's humanity and figure out what that walk is like. I recently had my first client on my caseload who came to me purely for pet bereavement. And she'd been in 2 years of a depressive episode and sought treatment. And it's been really incredible to see, her progress within 4 months. And I attribute so much of that to her. It's not like, oh, Quincy the magical therapist, but in the sense of just, I think it was showing up and naming it as real for her because it was so real for her. But our work, the empathy, Leslie, this just hits. Your students need bus passes, something really practical, and someone to listen to right now, please. And also, can you help me with my math? And that could be, someone who is 55, and that could be someone who's 15 across the work of, again, educators statewide, but centering adult education also and all the specific needs that come up around that. I saw that one and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that. And so again, you may absolutely, we want to name that the exposure to vicarious trauma is real. Also, the exposure to like demand overload and to overstimulation and the exposure to potentially also personally activating um, behaviors. Drop one in the chat if you support someone who activates you, who you are, it takes a lot for you to show up in the way that that person needs because things come up inside of you potentially about the way they're navigating their path. Those ones came really fast. Those were the fastest ones so far. As Gen Z would say, I learn all the Gen Z lingo from my therapy clients. They'd be like, period. Like this is so anything that I know that's trendy language is only from my therapy clients. But those were the fastest ones, and that was unanimous. So what does it mean to hold space, and how do you care for self? There's this expression, we can't pour from an empty cup. Okay, it drives me crazy. This expression, I why? Because innate to it is that you're only pouring into self so you can give. The idea is you can't pour from an empty cup. There's this conditioned, I think, especially if you're in leadership, you're in education, you're in human service, that we're only replenishing ourselves so that we can ... And I'd love to offer, we pour into self, period. When we pour into self, and full is like a tall order. Like, I don't want to put the pressure, right? Especially in December as a verb. Like, full is a dynamic, lifelong, I think, journey of figuring out what nourishes us and what helps us take the best care of ourselves. But if we are pouring into self, and then we put a period at the end of that sentence, so that we can then determine how we need and want to use our energies. So instead of it being one sentence, you can't pour from an empty cup, pour into self so that you then gain the agency, the choice, the empowerment to choose how you then use your precious resources, energy, time, knowledge, care, empathy. Can you drop in the chat one resource of yours that is precious to you? It absolutely could be one that I already named, or it could be something that I did not name. But just drop in the chat one that hit. We will not hold you to it. We know there are multiple precious resources, but what was one that just immediately hit? Empathy. Thank you, Joan. You could also come off mic and say it. Family, listening. And Maria, in correlated with family, what is the most precious resource that you desire to be able to give to them? Is it time? Is it listening? What is it for you? Catherine says being present.
Yeah, I think, the family side is it ebbs and flows, and it's also a give and take, right? And uh, it's being able to listen to them and their needs, and it's reciprocal, right? To be able to lean on them in times of needing things as well. Again, many of us have kids or grandchildren or things that are needed, and this is my life right now, right? So there's always a need for, situations that arise when you need people, but also uh just being able to listen, and being able to have difficult conversations with family members too, right? Like it's not something that is always lovey-dovey, but being able to have that hard conversation and be open and honest with each other.
I would really love to name that the healing potential and authenticity, saying the big thing out loud, is
Mm,
that that unto itself is a very, very astute and very astute observation. And authenticity, I think, perhaps is also one of our very precious resources. Thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely.
And so when we look at this particular slide, and I encourage you to continue to add into the chat, we think about encouraging nervous system regulation, boundary restoration, ground healing and ritual, embodiment, choice. What do we mean by ritual? Not the one-off, you know, not the like, I took the yoga class and I self-cared this month, right? I went to the yoga class. Or, I watched the YouTube video. I've meditated. I've self-cared, right? Check, put it on the checklist, which is why this little GIF is at the bottom. The last one always gets me. Eat a meal. Like how many, drop one if you've forgotten to eat a meal because you've been so busy caring for everyone around you. Yep, that came fast. Yep, these are pouring in. These are pouring in. And so, and I mean that GIF is funny, but not entirely like it's true. Like the actual physical nourishment. And I think that even the idea of like self-care looks like I knew a fellow therapist that was like, you got to keep grapes, almonds, and if you eat meat, turkey somewhere nearby. That's how you self-care. Because you won't look at them like a meal. She talked like this. She's like, you won't look at them like a meal. You'll just graze. But then you'll get these antioxidants. And I was laughing at the time. And then, X amount of years later into my therapeutic career, I was like, right, the almonds, because again, just that pouring into self, that looks like water or teas, or let me just see in the chat what has jumped up. Joan is with the almonds. Yes, yes. Because they fill you if you like almonds. Want to be very also trauma informed that we may have some nut allergies on this call, and so that almonds may be the antithetical solution for you. And so that cashews, so it does look like we have some of those who have an affinity for keeping nuts close by. But the idea of what is that? Keeping nourishment on hand. And that ritual is something that we are able to engage in a rhythm that feels good to us. Again, exploding the notion that it is something that has to be done every day necessarily, because that may not be right for Paula, and that might be right for Kathy when it comes to a certain practice. And I think, again, we're surrounded by so many messages about how we're supposed to care for ourselves that it's exhausting. And if you take anything from today, it's the intimate and customized nature of care. And that it doesn't have to look like care to anyone else around you if it feels like you are replenishing in a safe way, of course. So keeping those type of boundaries in mind. But if you are safely caring for self, I think it took my husband 17 years to realize that 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep was enough for me. And if I was up in the morning, I was writing a curriculum and I was catalyzed, and that felt really restorative to me. And then, he could sleep and wake up for Saturday college football, and that was restorative for him. See, it's each their own. And I used to make a lot of fun of it. Now I don't touch those college football games. I'm like, go escape into the story. So there's a story in the sports for him. And so again, looking very different for everyone. As some examples, containment rituals. So ending the workday with closure, daily closure routines. We're going to look at this in the next slide for a moment. What does that mean? It means something very different for everyone, and we'll go into that in the next slide. So compassion check-ins, debriefing with care, not reactivity. So I want to throw this out there. Sometimes your best friends are not your best co-regulators. So like the person that you call and you're like, and I can't believe, and this happened, and can you imagine? It feels really like it's gratifying might not be regulation. Sometimes it is, like sometimes the downloading, and for some people, it really is. It really is. But what if your best friend loves to do that? And if you actually restore and solace, like it's the podcast, it's the quiet in the car on the way home, it's the um, you know, it's the folk rock that no one like else in your household likes to listen to, but that you put on when you have those just brief moments. And so our co-regulators may not always be our closest colleagues or our closest friends. Sometimes they're the people who know that like we actually need to restore in silence like for 5 minutes. Like if anyone has a workspace where there's like some common space, your co-regulator might be the person who knows that the kindest thing you could do for each other is like grab your lunches, heat them up, if that is an option for you in your space, or just take them and be like, "Hello, it's good to see you," and keep it moving so that you're able to actually take a moment for self. Or you may be someone who recharges in that commune and needs to talk about the latest book, the latest podcast, the latest, you know, guilty pleasure Netflix binge, if that is something that speaks to you, or a show that you're watching, or something that you've planned that you're excited about. Somatic interventions, so these include tapping, movement, sensory resets. This can be everything from olfactory. So if you enjoyed like just having an aromatherapy candle in your in a home space, or visualization that allows you to go back to a space that contains also sensory memories, and boundary work. Some of us, it really works to have like a script in mind because we just want to give so much. I just worked with a client, and what she came up with, because everything is immediate for her, it has to happen in the day. That's just the nature of the job. Like she works in a crisis center, and it actually has to be attended to, but sometimes there's more administrative aspects of it. And so the language that we came up with when someone like would come to her in super urgency, but she knows it could be accomplished, but accomplished by the end of the day, was, "I recognize the urgency of this request. And my bandwidth will allow me to accomplish that for you by 3 p.m." when it's like 9 a.m. in the morning. And she knows it's not needed until 5 because it's administrative, not a client in crisis. And so again, she needs that script to know that she's got something that she feels like is aligned with who she is, that she can now say. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're a little more off the cuff and we're in the moment and we respond organically. So just to take in which tools felt a little more natural to you and which a little more resistible. And sometimes resistance can signal a growth edge, an opportunity. If you're like, "Nah, somatic interventions, not so much, not my favorite." That could be very valid. And it could be that like connecting with your body might hold a lot for you, and that there could be a gentle way to introduce what might happen if you did. So we're going to round out today with something called threshold rituals. So I mean, it's up here on the screen, but when this hit, what came up for you? Threshold rituals. What is Quincy talking about? Threshold rituals. Anyone want to come off mic and share like what came to mind when that came up?
I just thought about doorway, like
Yeah.
doorway, away, in or out.
Doorway in or out. Joan says the in between, the liminal space. So a threshold ritual, I introduced the idea of, and you can name it anything you want for our sake today. We'll call it this, but language and words hold deep meaning. So if there's a different way that you name it for self, that's fantastic. And this emphasizes protective boundaries between work and home life that are so needed when we're in service-oriented and often trauma-facing roles. This does not mean that you are taking away from all the work that you do. This is so that, as we said, you have the agency to choose how you then reapply that energy in your adult education classroom, in your carceral setting, in your administrative position that's overseeing an entire region or part of the state. And that these rituals are designed to be affirming, practical, emotionally resonant, and that not all of them are going to hit for you. I would be very surprised if all went like 8 of them, 9 of them were a match. If you found 1, 2, that would be something. And so just the idea that we're doing this in closing to honor our full humanity, not just as educators and advocates, but as people with families, homes, and inner lives that are deserving of peace, whatever you define peace as. So tools for work-home transitions. Does any stand out to anyone? Anyone want to come off mic and be like, what is that one or that one hit as you've been looking at the slide?
I was thinking transition object. I always take my watch off when I get home.
I love that. That is absolutely a threshold ritual. Can I ask you, Kathy, how that came up for you? What your why was?
I really don't remember. I've just always done it. Like, just I'm done watching the time. I'm done. And it's odd for people to even wear watches, but I still wear a watch. But it just for me, it's just a signal that I'm done. I'm home.
I love that.
Yeah,
And
I have an hour commute, so the commute reset was good. And I've always kind of said that since I started in this role in the Adirondacks. Like my hour commute is really like it gives me a reset. So when I leave work, I can decompress on the way home. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but then when I get home, I'm like into mom mode, right? And depending on what meal we're having, or if it's a everybody needs to take tubs and showers and story time, and then all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then like just not checking emails, before you go to bed. Like just it can wait. So, and because I do sleep, I'm a good sleeper. But often are up probably around 4:30 in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready, like it is a total reset for sure.
may I ask if you are all still able to see the slide? I noticed the little man was taking over some of the text, so I wanted to quickly fix him. We love all the energy that's flowing through his body, but we want to see our options too. So that with the commute reset, absolutely, or knowing the transition of roles. Any others come up? Let me check the chat. Catherine says, putting away my work bag, washing my hands, and then entering my home space. So the actual placement of objects, the actual ritual of cleansing energy, and dependent upon where you are working, feeling like you're bringing your chosen energy into the space. Verbal boundary detox. So work stays where I place it. I go home whole. So I'm sorry, verbal boundary practice. So if mantras or affirmations work for you, that's an offering. They don't work for everybody, but for some they really do. And I would like to open up the notion that they can look a lot of different ways. I've heard some saltier ones in my time that really work for some folks where it's like, I am enough is a very classic and grounding one, but sometimes, especially in the work that we do, it needs a little something, little spice to it to really hit. So I invite you to imagine what that could look like. If you are someone who journals, the accounting. I was real. I was here. Today I held space for. Now I return to. So being really intentional that you don't have to write, you absolutely welcome, but a full journal entry, but just this is what I did that mattered today. And it also matters that I'm returning back to this. Digital detox hour, this applies and works for some and doesn't for others. You may have a job where simply you've got to keep the phone to some degree nearby, or you may have multiple grandchildren and children who are at practices and places. And absolutely may need you on a moment's notice. And that actually may be something that grounds you to know that you're now in that space. So I want to hold space that this one works well for some, and for others is just not practical. And the idea of a home joy anchor. So a physical space, a playlist, a, a joy jar, something that you do at home that brings you joy, a song that you put on. I have these so I love Alice in Wonderland. So this was an early birthday gift. So it's a little terrarium with the rabbit and the mushrooms and the looking glass. And when I sit down at the computer, it's a home joy anchor. I put it on and I'm like, oh, I've got these fun little lights around me. And in my own little eccentric, life, that brings me, huh, okay, I'm home. I'm in my space. For me, it's my Alice in Wonderland terrarium. To each their own, you know? And so for you, what is your home joy anchor? And so in the very short amount of time that we have left, I'm going to purposely stop screen share. And oh, thank you so much, Theo. And I see that we're right at one. I wonder if in closing you could drop one potential threshold ritual that you will engage in this week. And I'm not even saying today. I'm saying in this week, because sometimes we need to scaffold, prepare, release pressure, root into possibility. So you could come off mic or drop it in the chat.
I
Hi,
can say
Joan.
I can say mine. Yeah, similar, I guess, with the lighting. I really don't like overhead lights. So as soon as I get home, like I find what I need to, and then I put on like I have all these other lights that are not the overhead lights, and
Love
it's
that.
always kind of dark, but like just enough light to kind of read or do whatever. And so I always do that, like when I first get home, and just have like my cave, I guess, with my Christmas lights and just like calm lighting.
The sensory reset and you setting the terms of the space. I love that. I hear from Maria, the commute reset. Leslie Wright, the leaving the work phone at work. I'd love to invite Paula, Kathy, Barbara, um, Catherine. Oh no, Catherine has mentioned one already. If you'd like to add another, that's your intention for the week, just in our closing. Paula, can anyone else hear Paula? Paula, maybe just mute and unmute. Sometimes turn it off, turn it on works. Oh no, so we'd love to hear from you in the chat.
So I guess I'm going to leave my phone maybe in the car for the first hour or two before I go back and get it, right? Maybe I can't separate completely, but I'll give myself let's try for an hour.
And I want to really hold space that there's not a right way to do like the phone detox, that may be very realistic and grounding and affirming for the needs. And so thank you for that differentiated example. Paula, listen to music on the way home. I am dying to hear what's on Paula's playlist, but I know that we are. We are out of time. Um, Leslie, thank you so much. And go relieve someone for their lunch now. And I invite you just into the idea of the stewardship of self and of these threshold rituals. And I'm so grateful for us coming together, creating a third space from all over the state. And thank you so much to Maria and to the NYACCE for holding these spaces for us to come together and learn from one another. I've taken in so much from all of you today. I leave with deep gratitude.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your willingness to share your
Wonderful.
expertise with the field. So we thank you as well.
Thank you so much.
I did record the session, so it will be available for those of you. You'll get an email link for it, but it will also go on NYACCE's YouTube page. So thank you again. This is something that you can always revisit when you feel the need. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week and the holiday season. Please be safe and enjoy with your friends and families.
Thank you all.
Have a great week.